Today, ladies and gentlemen, I had planned to interview Congressman Dawson, the very respected Negro congressman from Chicago. But because of the international crisis, I know that he won't mind if I delay it a week or so. And instead, I'm going to talk about one particular war crisis that I happen to know something about, namely the brutal crushing of Hungary. I've been sitting at my desk getting telephone calls from all sorts of people. Pathetic calls, generous calls, humanitarian calls from people who wanted to do something, wanted to know what they could do. One young Air Force officer, a major with 3 children, said he wanted to go over there and fight for the liberation of Hungary. He said that many young officers would like to join him. And I got a call from an old friend of mine, Dr. Bela Fabian, the gnarled leader of the Hungarian underground. He gave me this message. Half of Budapest is in flames. The population is not permitted to go on the streets to put out the fires or buy food. Mongolian troops have arrived because Russian troops fraternize with the Hungarians. The Mongolians are entering the houses and raping the women. Teenage boys and girls are being lined up at the railroad station, loaded on boxcars to Siberia. The youth of Hungary, which wants freedom, is being weeded out. That was the message from the underground. Well, getting these calls started a train of memories on my part, going back many, many years ago, right after World War I, when I visited Hungary, a beautiful country. Budapest on both sides of the Blue Danube River, ancient houses, wonderful people, beautiful farms, people who wanted peace and freedom. And I thought back over many things, thought back to the days when I discovered that the Hungarian minister in Washington, Dr. Emil Weil, was the doctor who had administered the drug to Cardinal Menzetti when he allegedly confessed. And after I exposed that, eventually we chased Dr. Weil out of Washington back to Hungary. And my memory went back to the first days of the freedom balloons launched 5 years ago from Germany into Czechoslovakia and later into Hungary. I wanted to call them friendship balloons because they carried only messages of friendship from the American people. And at first they did. They didn't encourage anyone to revolt. Later, however, that policy changed. It changed in the fall of 1952 during the campaign for election of President Eisenhower, when John Foster Dulles, speaking in Buffalo and trying to win over the Polish-American vote, promised that if elected, the new administration would encourage revolt behind the Iron Curtain. Well, President Truman at that time differed with that. He thought that was a dangerous policy, and I remember that John Foster Dulles came back and re-emphasized it. And so later, that did become the official policy of the new administration to encourage revolt behind the Iron Curtain. And the whole tone of our propaganda changed, and things began to happen. In a minute, I'll tell you what we did or did not do about it. Now, I don't need to tell you what's been going on behind the Iron Curtain in Hungary. You've all read the terrible, tragic headlines. But you may not know what's been going on behind the scenes in Washington, where some very important conferences have been taking place in the White House to see what could be done. At one of these conferences, the president's advisors gave a very alarming picture of what was happening in Central Europe. They said that up here in East Germany, there were 22 divisions of the Red Army massed and mobilized, ready for action. The Polish border is sealed, and the Red Army is in complete control. Poland is black. These little countries up here, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, are also completely under Russian control. They are black. And over here in the Soviet Union proper, there are 150 divisions armed and ready. Down here, Czechoslovakia has been restless, but now it's completely under the thumb of Moscow. It is black. An interesting thing happened here in Romania. 4 divisions of the Red Army were taken out of Romania to go over here to Hungary to subdue the riots over there, and immediately Romania began to riot, and those 4 divisions had to be sent back to Romania. Down here is Bulgaria, which is also under the thumb of Moscow, not very much doing down there. Albania, a little country here, isolated from the others, is also black and communistic. But Yugoslavia still remains has its independence under Tito and is the hope of many of these countries. All of these countries have been watching Hungary to see what she would do, to see whether she would get help from the United States. And today, as we know, Hungary is subdued, bloody, bleeding, bruised, and completely under Moscow. And so you have a chain of nations from the Baltic up here, restless prisoner nations going down here to the Balkans. All of them have been watching little Hungary to see what we would do to carry out the dullest promise of revolution and help in case of revolt. All these things were considered at the White House, very carefully considered, and in the end the decision was to do nothing, because the only power we had was the H or A bomb, and to drop those bombs over Europe would set the world on fire. Now, I don't question that decision. I'm just reporting it. If I were president, I'd probably do the same thing. However, it's a decision that comes probably once in a lifetime, because revolt behind the Iron Curtain probably will come once in a lifetime. Freedom, once crushed to earth, does not rise again easily. Now, the decision at the White House was not an only that. It went a little further, namely to try to persuade Russia, if she would respect our interests, oil in the Near East, then we would respect her alleged interests in the satellite countries. In other words, power politics, a deal, namely the protection of oil for the sacrifice of human lives in the satellite countries. Now, some people didn't agree with that. Some people inside the administration, they remembered the power politics of Sir Neville Chamberlain's day, Prime Minister of England, when he went to Munich to kowtow to Hitler, the famous umbrella appeasement policy. Appeasement that eventually led to brown-shirted Nazis goose-stepping and heiling Hitler all over Central Europe, that eventually led to World War II. Today, the uniforms are different. The flags are different. The dictators are different. But the policy of crushing freedom with an iron heel is just the same. I hope the end result, however, will not be the same. In just a minute, I'll make a suggestion as to what President Eisenhower might do. As I said a minute ago, it isn't easy to be in the shoes of the President of the United States. But I think if I were president, I would write a letter to my old wartime friend, Marshal Zhukov, now commanding troops in Hungary, or to Marshal Bulganin, somewhat as follows. Dear Marshal, at Geneva and since, you have said a great deal about peace. I have just been re-elected by a great majority of the American people who also want peace. I believe further that the people of Hungary and other nations under your jurisdiction have the same human desire for peace and freedom burning in their hearts. So I suggest you come over here and talk it over. I'd be glad to come to your country, but I've been there once before, right after the war. You've never been over here. It's a nice country, a friendly country. I'd like to have you see it. Be my guest at the White House. The American people seem to have confidence in me, and perhaps if we sit down together, we can both have confidence in each other. Perhaps we can work out some plans to keep the peace and bring freedom to all parts of the world. That, I humbly submit, would be my letter to Premier Bulganin if I were president. Because, my friends, men and nations aren't born free and equal. They earn their freedom by their courage. The test of that courage may come and be met by the ringing speech of a Patrick Henry or on the cobblestone streets of Budapest. The bulletins from Moscow say that Hungary was crushed. But that message was written from the terrible fear that nothing sets a conflagration of freedom like blazing courage. If the Battle of Budapest was lost, so was Bunker Hill, so was the Bastille, so was the Alamo. It's a bitterly grim but historical fact that before the seeds of freedom become the flower of liberty, the soil must be soaked with patriots' blood. No country has ever been able to change that price, and it can't be paid on the installment plan. If this is an hour of pain and sorrow, it's also an hour of exultation. Far from messages being sent to the people of Hungary, they have sent a message to the civilized world. That message, written in their own blood, is that liberty will live, and it's worth dying for. In a minute, I'll give you a suggestion as to what you can do. Now, there's not very much you and I can do for satellite freedom from this distance, but you can do this. Write a postcard to Premier Bulganin with one word on it: shame. The address is Moscow. The postage is 10 cents. Premier Bulganin, Moscow, shame. I'll see you next week.